Hi, this is episode 58 of Crondos. I'm your host, Jordan Hudgens. I'm a Ruby dev and the CTO of the DevCamp platform. A few weeks ago, I discussed what it takes to become a great developer. That guide was the most popular one I posted on Crondos yet, so I wanted to follow that up with tips on how to stay sharp as a developer. Before I get into the tips, let's drill down what it means to stay sharp. When I think of the concept of staying sharp, images of focused skill come to mind. From a programming perspective, a sharp developer to me is one that feels confident working with challenging projects and can calmly adjust to changing requirements. I've mentioned in previous guides that developers never remain at the same skill level. As a programmer, you're either improving or you're losing your expertise. There's no middle ground. So how can you stay sharp as a developer? First on my list are coding exercises. At the end of the day, nothing is going to help you improve as a programmer as much as diving straight into the code. You may think that working on work or hobby projects are enough to keep your skills sharp. However, it's been my experience that many of the projects I manage for work don't really test my skill as a developer. There are exceptions, of course, but much of the coding I do on work projects revolve around application configuration as opposed to algorithm design. Growing up, I was able to watch baseball players that my dad coached. These were major league athletes who were at the peak of their profession. I still remember how they stayed sharp as hitters. Playing in games was not how they improved. Games were simply how they showed off their skill. Instead, they became better players by going through drills and exercises that focused on specific components of their game. In the same way, we as developers need to dedicate time on improving specific elements of our coding techniques. This image is a GitHub gist of some of the coding exercises I go through regularly. Above each code snippet is a task, and my job is to place the implementation code below the objective. These programming exercises force me to continually refine my skill and find new and better solutions to complex problems. Some example questions are: remove strings from an array that start with the word system. This requires me to work with the array data structure, integrate a regular expression matcher, and know how to remove selected elements. Another example would be convert an array of strings into a hash that has the string as the key and the value as the string's length. This exercise forces me to understand how the hash data structure functions, how to use the enumerable map method, and how to work with blocks. And the list goes on and on. I'm continually adding new problems to solve, and I try to spend some time each day on them. Around 30 minutes to an hour working through these exercises is usually what my goal is for the day. If you're looking for a great list of programming problems, I'd check out Project Euler. There you'll find hundreds of great challenges that you can work through and build up your own set of coding exercises. Next on the list is to teach others how to code. I was homeschooled growing up, and around age 12, I had to start teaching myself algebra. I initially struggled with learning new concepts, and I was getting frustrated. My mom realized that when I studied by myself, I had a hard time understanding what I was reading. But when I explained the lesson to her, that my comprehension skyrocketed. She was teaching all of my siblings, so she couldn't be by my side all day. It just wasn't practical. So instead, she got one of my sister's dolls and sat it next to me at the table. She instructed me to read the lesson plan and then explain it to the doll. At first, I thought it was the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Explaining algebra to a doll, aptly named Big Dolly due to her gigantic size, seemed akin to a homeless person talking to himself at the bus stop. So I did what every 12-year-old would probably do, and I ignored the advice. Until I went through my next lesson and realized I had no idea what I had just read. So, after staring at the doll for a few awkward seconds, I started to explain the concept to her. Shockingly, by walking through the lesson with the doll, I started to understand it, and no one was more surprised than myself. So Big Dolly helped me get through algebra, trig, and calculus. So how does my very weird story about teaching a doll algebra apply to staying sharp as a developer? Well, when I started to learn programming, I didn't pick it up right away either. In fact, I really struggled with how to build applications. But then I remembered back to my high school math era. But instead of bringing Big Dolly back from the attic, I started creating programming tutorials. It was through teaching others that I started to understand development better than I ever have when I was doing it by myself. In fact, the origins of DevCamp and Crondos can be traced back to my desire to improve my own skill by teaching others. So I highly recommend it if you're looking to learn coding or how to improve as a developer. Teach others and your own expertise will grow. Next on the list is reading. I have a membership to Safari Books Online, which is essentially like a Netflix for developers. Through that membership, I have access to thousands of coding books. On my daily to-do list, I have about 7 to 8 books that I go through. Sometimes I read a few small sections, and other times I'll read a few chapters, depending on how much time I have and just kind of what my mood is on that given day. Going through the development books has helped me continually refine my skills as a programmer, and I'm constantly on the hunt for new great books to go through. Fourth on the list are development newsletters. I try to keep my time very focused. Therefore, I limit the number of newsletters I subscribe to so that I can dedicate time to reviewing each one of them when they get published. Some of my favorites are the newsletters from Thoughtbot and from CodeChip. These type of resources contain comprehensive guides that will help give you a unique perspective on development and how to learn to implement new features. Last on today's list of tips for staying sharp as a developer are tutorials. Whenever I'm learning a new language or framework, tutorials are one of my favorite resources for studying. Screencasts are the closest you can get to having an instructor in the room with you, providing you with a step-by-step guide that you can follow in order to build applications yourself completely from scratch. Thankfully, with the growth of the online education industry, there are tutorials for essentially everything that you want to learn. I hope that this has been a helpful set of tips that help you stay sharp as a developer, and good luck with the coding.